Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the press conference that many of you have been waiting for. One of the press conferences that I know will be a highlight for many people who want to understand the substance of what it is that we are saying in this general election campaign. Indeed, probably the press conference during the course of the whole of the campaign, which will deal in greater detail with the possibilities that Gibraltar is facing in terms of the development of its economy after we leave the European Union, and therefore an essential part of the programme for government of any one of the parties standing for election, except of course it's only the GSLP Liberals in their manifesto that have a post-Brexit economic plan, and that post-Brexit economic plan has the credibility of having been designed by the only man who has repositioned Gibraltar's economy once already, in '88, after the GSLP first won the general election, and Sir Joe had to reposition the economy after the withdrawal of the MOD. And in the context of what we're looking at in the coming years, whether it's a departure from the European Union with a deal, which then leads to a transitional period, and then not being part of the European Union thereafter, or leaving without a deal, these are hugely important matters which every member of the electorate must be asking themselves about and needs to believe that the party that they select at the election on Thursday has the ability to deal with. Additionally, it's also true that in all the elections that I have had the honour of standing with him, and before then also, Sir Joe has been able to predict the performance of the Gibraltar economy over the lifetime of that parliament, over that 4-year period. Sometimes when he's made those predictions, his political opponents have suggested that he was wrong and fanciful. And even though Sir Joe has gone on to be on the losing side in those elections, the economy, under those who believed his predictions to be fanciful, have performed in keeping with his predictions and not in keeping with the proposals of those who have criticized him. So the man with the credibility to produce a post-Brexit economic plan, the man with the legitimacy to stand before the electorate and say, I believe I know how our economy is going to perform, and this is how I believe we should be taking our economy for the next 4 years, is Sir Joe Bossano, and he's going to give us some more detail today about how that economic plan is designed and what it is designed to do. Sir Joe.
Thank you. I think what Fabian just mentioned, for example, was about the prediction I made in the election campaign of 2007, when I said in 2008 it would be 800 million, and in 2011 it would be 1.2 billion, and it turned out to be 1.201. And Peter Caruana, who was in the leaders' debate, when I mentioned those figures, said they're so ridiculous that he would have attacked me on it during the election campaign if he'd realized that it was in our manifesto. Well, look, I wasn't saying that we were going to do it. I was saying that, in fact, that is what was already happening in the economy from the indicators that have been there. And therefore, if you know what to look for, you see where the economy is going, you are able then to take corrective action if it's not heading in the direction you wanted to head. The ability to do that is the result of the fact that I've been there for as long as I have been. In 1972, we voted to join the European Community, and I was elected to the House of Assemblies it was then. So that means that every time that as a member of Parliament I've been involved in the debates in the House on the state of the economy or the state of public financing, we have been in the European Union. There isn't one budget between 1973 and the budget of this year that we were not in the European Union. So that gives you an indicator of the magnitude of the change. So what can we do to look for indicators of what it's like to be outside the European Union? Go back to 1972, except that the economy of 1972 is no longer here. So we haven't got a previous situation which resembles the one we are likely to be facing on the 1st of November. Of course, it won't happen on the 1st of November. It doesn't mean that somehow everything will come to a halt at 1 minute past midnight. But the post 1st of November or the post 1st 2021, January 21, or if there is a transition until there is a transition, is one where the trading framework within which we operate will be one in which we've never been before. It will not be an economy that has got predominantly a major source of money, which was MOD. I mean, in terms of looking economically at the MOD presence, the MOD presence was our export earnings, because you can either export something by taking it to where your customer is, or you can bring your customer to you, and it's still an export. It's they call it invisible exports. So if tourists come and buy things in gym, or military personnel are stationed there and buy things, it has the same effect. The origin of the money is not from within the economy. And that is the essence. We cannot make a success of the Gibraltar economy by selling to each other. We have to sell to outsiders, because we buy from the outside world. And in order to buy from the outside world, we need foreign exchange. And foreign exchange is what the multinational companies that are here earn. In this context, it is not that there is a direct, immediate consequence on our economy. It's that there is a direct, immediate consequence on our customers' economies. And our customers' economy are going to suffer. And increasingly, the number of economies that are predicting that the forces of a recession are getting stronger by the day can be read in any national paper in Europe or in the US. The German economy is not doing well, and it is the engine of the 27 that remain in the EU. The United Kingdom economy is facing such a problem, that what the Chancellor has announced is an increase in the deficit, because one of the things that perhaps people don't appreciate in Gibraltar, because of the criticisms about debt, is that when we are talking about debt here, we're talking about borrowing money to buy fixed capital projects. It's like borrowing money to buy a car. It's not borrowing money to buy the petrol for the car. Well, in the economy of the UK, they buy the money to buy the petrol for the car. The recurrent deficit is going to be allowed to grow, and the public debt is expected to reach 90% of GDP. And that is being done to counteract. This is the UK economic plan for counteracting Brexit, is to borrow more and run deficits. Look, we are sticking by the golden rule that was introduced by the GSLP in 1988, before anybody else had it, which is that we only borrow for capital investment. In fact, the first thing I did in the first budget in 1988 was to cancel expenditure and stop the deficit that we inherited in 87, 88. And that has continued to be the policy. I have to say, during the 15 GSD years, they kept to that golden rule, and so have we. And we are confident that we will be able to continue to do that into the next 4 years, and that we will not go into a deficit, which everybody else is likely to be having, and that our economy will still be growing and not shrinking like everybody else's will be shrinking. But a shrinking economy and deficits mean that people that we sell to will have less money to buy, and therefore we expect that our capacity for growth would be seriously eroded. And to ensure that we do a damage limitation exercise of that erosion, we've actually got an economic plan that does the opposite, that impels new elements into our economy. Like the last one, the important element is the creation of a land bank. So we're talking about a level of reclamation, which is some of which has already been announced, and some of which will be announced in due course. But in all, the figures of what this means in terms of the reclamation are in the plan. We're talking about the consequence of the reclamation being the ability to create new land which will be for industrial use as opposed to being for housing. So there's the new land for housing, which is where we're talking about 1,500 new units independent of the ones that are already been announced. And we're talking about new land for the creation of infrastructure which has to do with industrial storage. And we're talking about moving in the direction that the UK has already announced. The UK is putting into a particular new development a provision of something like £2.6 billion in order to change the construction industry away from traditional building methods. One of the peculiar things about the construction industry is that, in effect, we haven't changed the way we build in the last 2,000 years. You can go to, Ercolani or Pompeii or one of these places where have been uncovered from the lava, and you will see two-story building made with one brick being put over another, Roman bricks, but still bricks. The new methods, of which there is already something going on. There's a huge project that was launched by Cameron, who was Prime Minister, the Manchester Airport City, a £500 million development, and that is all being done off-site. That is to say, there is a factory that produces the construction, and then that construction is assembled. There are two off-site systems. The concept is called MMC, Modern Methods of Construction, and the United Kingdom is investing 2.6 billion in moving the UK construction industry into that direction. It has a number of consequences. One is a huge increase in productivity, particularly in a place like the UK, where the weather, although nowadays you cannot say what the weather is going to be like anywhere, but where the weather traditionally has created periods when building sites become inaccessible. The fact that you've got a factory means that that factory can be operating on shift work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, building the units, and then when the weather's good enough to go on the building site, it's simply delivered on a lorry and it's slotted, and you create the structure of the site and it's slotted. And I've been there and I've seen the inauguration. So they call them pots, and the pots are complete houses, and you just create the structure. That's one method of doing it. And the other method is similar to what we initiated when we did the building components factory here, but it is not, the methodology no longer uses massive blocks of concrete, but conceptually it is doing pieces of the building and then assembling them like a Lego, right? So we are planning when I say we, I mean the government is planning this obviously, but it will not be a government-run proposal. It will be a proposal that will be run with partners in the private sector. Right? So we will not be using government workers to be doing these things. The government will have a participation, and part of the economic plan is a way of bringing about greater economic activity, where we've got a company that has been in existence for a number of years. Since we came in, it's called the Economic Development and Training Company. The EDEC has a function which was really introduced, focused on training rather than in economic development. But the whole idea was that EDEC would get involved with inward investors and then identify the skills that those inward investors would be looking for. For example, recently we've had two particular inward investors that we've been talking to, which illustrate the nature of the thing. One is somebody that wants to start a business here doing cleaning of ships' hulls with a new technology that removes the stuff that aggregates on the bottom of ships, which has the effect of reducing the speed and consuming more fuel. And one of the problems with removing it is that the methods of removal until now means that the stuff that gets removed finishes up on the seabed, and that is considered to be a bad thing because it contaminates the seafloor and it affects life in the sea. So this guy has invented something that actually removes it and captures it so that it doesn't go to the bottom of the sea, and is interested in having a station here to do that. In some cases, it will be people going to other places from Gibraltar to do the work. And taking on trainees, and this is why the Ministry for Economic Development talks to the investor, is prepared to provide financial help for that investor to set up shop and support for taking on trainees with the purpose of ensuring that the skills that we're producing are the skills that are going to be required by the businesses that are coming in. I think it's very important to understand why the future job strategy and the training for employment was developed in the way that it was. I've explained that before to people, and when they look at other places, of course, they seem to forget how small the market in Gibraltar is for labour compared to any nation, either the one across the border or the one in the UK, which is the one we compare ourselves with. And the normal thing in training is that you train people with a particular skill, and then when they're trained, they go out looking for work. And if there is no work in Brighton, then they go to the town next door from Brighton and they look for work there. And if you train a guy in La Linea and there's no work in La Linea, then he goes to San Roque, to Algeciras. Well, in Gibraltar, if you train the guy with a skill, he expects that the skill should be here. He doesn't expect to have to go to the UK, and he doesn't expect to have to go into Spain to look for work. So it is not enough to say, I'm putting skills on the market, and I'm going to have mobile workers which will go where the skills are. That is not the case. I mean, particularly in the case of Spain, where the wages are half hours, you're not going to have people who are getting the national minimum wage at the age of 50 when they come into trade, and then less than the minimum wage when they finish their apprenticeship and they go to work in Spain. So it makes the training more difficult, because in fact the training is limited to training for known opportunities. And the only way we've been able to identify known opportunities is by looking at what we have in the employment service in the demand for labour. I can tell you that at the moment there are around 1,000 vacancies open in the ETB. Those vacancies have been opened between May and September this year. These are the ones that continue unfilled. There's a constant turnover of vacancies being filled, but at any one time we have a figure of 800 to 1,000. Out of those, there are 5 in the construction industry. Of those 5 in the construction industry, one is for a wet trades, which is a kind of training we're giving, and the other one is for the handyman, right? And the other 3 are electrical ones, electrical vacancies. The electrical vacancies are a problem, and some of the others are a problem, but the electrical in particular are a problem because the whole of the training systems in the United Kingdom was changed by a report produced by Lord Sainsbury, who happened in 2016, who happened to be the man who he was a minister in the United Kingdom. He was a member of the famous Sainsbury family, and he was the one who came to Gibraltar to open our training centre when he was Minister for Trade. And he's always been involved in training. The system that there was then, when we opened the training centre in 1996, is a system that continued for 15 years, and everybody thought was fine, and continues today, and everybody thinks it's awful. So it was only awful when we were doing the same thing, but not awful when our critics were doing it. Right? In fact, one of the things that the Apprenticeship Council said in the UK was that it was no good somebody coming with a lot of qualifications and not the skills that employers needed. They've gone so far down this road, more than we have in the United Kingdom, to the degree that they negotiate with a body that is representative of the industry, which we don't have here, you know, but they have in the UK. So if you're negotiating with the automotive industry, the people who build the cars, then you negotiate the apprenticeships with them, and they will tell you what they want the apprentice to be able to do. In some cases, the employer gives the actual qualifications, not an awarding body like we have here. The awarding bodies in the UK, the City and Guilds, are still the predominant body, but there has been a move where employers provide the training and give the qualification, and that qualification is recognized by other employer in the industry because there is a collective body that controls that industry. Here we have got the old system, but we made the old system more responsive to the needs of the industry. And this is why, for example, when we're looking at the construction industry in particular, and when we look at it at where that industry is going in the future, if we're going to have modern methods of construction, then there are no bricks in the modern methods of construction. So if you have bricklayers, there's not going to be any bricks for the bricklayer to lay. So we've got a situation where there are buildings that are still made of bricks. There are buildings that have been built with the old systems. We have to train people to maintain the buildings that we've got. And if you look at the nature of our construction industry, look, the biggest employer in Gibraltar in terms of construction is Casais, that has got about 400 workers. They have one Gibraltarian, right? They are very competitive because they are part of a big group and they can bring what they need overnight from Portugal, and they don't have to be able to recruit somebody in Gibraltar to do it. So they've got the supplies of being part of a bigger group, and that makes it a very competitive company in terms of their pricing and the delivery. But what we need permanently are the people that will be here maintaining those buildings, because if somebody comes from the outside, as they have done, for the level of construction that we've had, we know that the construction industry, in fact, fluctuates by about 50%. That is to say, at the peak is about 3,500, and at the bottom is under 2,000. So, when there is very little construction, we've got about, 1,800, 1,900 workers, the bulk of whom will be doing maintenance work. And when there is a lot of construction, there are as much as 3,500 workers, of which there will be about 1,000 that are always there doing the maintenance work, and the bulk of the extra 2,000 will be the people who come in and they go. And the direction in which the industry is already, before it goes further into off-site building, is that there is a main contractor and then specialist subcontractors. And there will be people who come in and do bathrooms, and that's all they do. They only do bathrooms. So they come in when the bathrooms need to be done, and bring people who do nothing but bathrooms, and that's all they know how to do, what to do. And they do the bathrooms, and they do them, and they finish them, and they go. The next stage in that is that the bathrooms will be put in the house in a factory, and the factory will be brought to the site. And that is where the UK is going. It's already happening in Spain. There's a project in Estepona which is being built like that in the private sector. So what we are trying to do is position ourselves where we know the future is going to be, and therefore position ourselves by bringing investment into Gibraltar that will be doing things that we think are consonant with us being outside the European Union and still growing, but at a pace of growth which is less than half what we've been used to in the last 4 years. So the prediction that we've made, it's more than a prediction, it's the commitment of what we think we can deliver, is based, if you like, on a worst case scenario, although there is a worse case than the one we've taken on. The worst case would be, for example, the proposition that there is a transition period, and as Fabian has explained previously, we would be left out of that transition period if we retract ourselves from what was negotiated by Fabian and Joseph in terms of the agreements needed for us to be included. There are agreements that were reached with Spain, which removes the Spanish objection to us being in the transition period. Whether we like it or we don't, and we don't like it, Spain had the ability to say we would not be in. If we are not in the transition period, that would not just be the worst case scenario, that would be an impossible scenario. Because the one thing that is worse than anything else is that we should be in one place and the UK in another. We don't want to be in the EU without UK. We know that we'll be completely at the mercy of Spain with vetoes all over the place and no veto on the UK side. And if they are in and we are out, that creates another hugely potential problem. Our access to the UK might be hindered if UK is still in the EU and we don't have access to the EU. That is not a scenario that we consider the possibility of, because Fabian and Joseph have already undertaken a process that guarantees that will not happen. So that is not longer a scenario. The worst scenario is the one that is likely to be the case, which is UK comes out, no deal now or no deal in the future, and the economy is shrinking where the customers are. In that context, we're talking about the estimate that we put in the last election was that we would grow to 2.4 billion, which was double the size that our economy was in 2011 when we came in, went up from 1.2 to 2.4. We expected to get to 2.4, and I said in that economic plan 4 years ago, if we get some of the projects that are potentially there happening, then I'm confident that the growth will be £100 million higher. At the moment, we are past the 2.5. I think we'll probably come in at 2.57. So if we come in near the 2.6, then we are projecting on that basis that in 4 years' time we will reach £3 billion. That is to say, a country with 30,000 people will be delivering an output of £3 billion in the middle of a recession. That is the worst case scenario. We don't know when the recession will get going, we don't know how long it will start, but the whole of the global economy and the Western economies in particular are on very shaky ground. All the indicators we've got is that the traditional instruments available to governments to stimulate economic activity don't seem to work anymore. And therefore, nobody's saying, well, look, I mean, we are in a situation where if we were doctors instead of economists, the population would be dying like flies and we wouldn't know how to cure them. Because in effect, if you're a doctor and you say, well, look, people have delivered a resistance to a particular antibiotic, you look for a different antibiotic. No? They're not looking for another one. The body of established theory is such that nobody's been able to think outside the box and say, well, look, maybe the changes in the nature of the way economies work now means that what would work 50 years ago doesn't work anymore. But, I mean, there has never been in the history of the Western capitalist system, and there's never been in any textbook on the system a situation where the way you encourage people to save money is by penalizing them with a negative interest rate. I mean, it defies all the logic of the laws of supply and demand, because the idea is that people save money because they are rewarded by getting paid an interest rate. At the moment in Germany, you are punished for saving money, because if you save money and you put it in the bank, you have to pay the bank. So in that is a kind of world we're in. Difficult. But if you look at the detail of the risk there, and I'm happy, to answer any questions in any point of detail that you have, you can see the direction in which we are taking it. And another element of that direction that is new and a departure is that until now, we've looked at job creation as an indicator of a successful economic policy. We're now looking at a different scenario. We're now looking at the kind of economy that will rely more on higher value, more productive work, rather than lower value, more labor-intensive work. So, in effect, the target on this occasion is not to grow the number of jobs in the economy, but to try and keep the economy at the level that I think it will be when the employment survey results come out in 6 months' time. The survey is taking place now. I think it's likely that that the current figure is something like 32,000. Last October it was 30,000, and we went up by about 2,000 compared to the previous October. So I am assuming that the trend has continued unchanged and that we are now at 32,000. And what we're saying is we hope to be able to achieve £3 billion of output with 30,000 people. So that the gain will be because we will be using our human resources more efficiently, not because we're bringing more in. Sometimes people don't realize, but it's a very simple equation, you know. If you've got 3 people producing 3 units of output, and you go from 3 to 6 people and 6 units of output, there's no wealth created. Everybody, you know, is 1 to 1. And we haven't been in that situation, but we've been close enough to it to make it difficult for the government finances to benefit by the level of growth. So the level of growth has been more than the finances of the government, because since we've been putting a continuing increase in the minimum that or the maximum that people earn before they start paying tax, or the minimum where the tax comes in, it means that when we raise the minimum wage and we raise the threshold for tax, if you look at the 1,000 jobs that I've told you that exist, at least a third of them are paying £7 an hour. Those people at £7 an hour will pay social insurance but virtually no tax at all. So, you know, a lot of workers that pay no tax looks as if our economy was delivering in fiscal terms what is delivering in economic terms. They are 2 totally different things. And I think that is something also that we want to address in the economic plan. In addition, there are 2 specific things, and that is the seeding capital will be on the basis that we will want to take a share in some of the new activities as a government. And as part of the recurrent expenditure of the Ministry for Economic Development, because it's seed capital, there will be things that will work and things that will not work. And we are saying, well, look, that is recurrent expenditure, and when it doesn't work, and we lose our money and our partner loses his. The ones that work and start making a profit will then be transferred to the ownership of the savings bank. So that if in initial stages the businesses that we share with somebody else are not making money, the government will take those losses as part of the normal expenditure of the Ministry for Economic Development. When they start making money, then we will put them in the savings bank so that we accumulate the profits of those businesses, and they are reflected in the profits that are accumulating in the savings bank, which we had hoped would reach 70 million this year, but are likely to be just about 50. There were 48 million in March, 50, maybe 55 this year, you know. So what we want is that is part of our rainy day fund, you know. I mean, we certainly hope it will not be raining after Brexit, and we will have to put some of those funds to use. But the world is so uncertain now in economic terms and indeed in environmental terms, you know, that if there ever was a reason in the 1980s for having a rainy day fund, that reason is now 10 times more important, you know. And therefore, that fund will be something that will not be dependent on the government having to do it. There will be a machine there that will be a self-generating machine of wealth for the future generations. So that's one element that we've got in there. And I think one thing more that I need to mention is that credit finance, of course, is going to be involved in the investments in these areas, and that the profits of that will go to the savings bank, and that the policy of the alternative to the GSLP Liberal government is committed to doing away with credit finance, and is committed to doing away with the savings bank as we know it today, and put it back as a savings bank that they had, which was one with reserves of £1,444 and 70 million deposits from the public. The commutation of pensions for civil servants and for opposition members that also take advantage of what they don't like would not be possible if they got into government and they did away the machinery that we use, would not be possible. the 5% debentures for pensioners, for resident pensioners, that are provided by the savings bank, are only provided by the savings bank because the savings bank is investing that money in the economy. If the savings bank had the money in a safe in the bank and not earning anything, they wouldn't be able to get nothing coming in and 5% going out. So if they don't give the debentures because they don't want the savings bank to be doing what it's intended to do, although Roy Clinton has, to his credit, accepted that what it does is the function of a development bank. What we're doing is what development banks do. I don't know if they will be happy if we called it the Gibraltar Savings Development Bank. But the other side is, well, look, they were providing 5% debentures for pensioners as a government. But of course, if they want to do that, we've got now something like 70 million in debentures when we came in, and there's now in debentures something like 700 million, and a total of deposits from the public, which is now 1.25 billion, as opposed to 70 million. So if you had to provide those opportunities for savings to pensioners, you would then have to add a massive amount of public debt, because it would be government debentures, would be public debt. So, you know, there are contradictions in the things that they say that they will do, which have effects which I don't think they've thought through themselves. I can assure you that this is unlikely to be happening with our economic plan. I have spent a lot of time on this. We've been preparing for this for a very long time. It's not something that we're going to prepare on the 1st of November. It's something that we've never brought it out in public, but I did give some indications in the budget that we had something in the pipeline to prepare us for this. You know, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I think this is still the way we need to go. There are many other things other than Brexit that are pointing the world in that direction.
So he hasn't drawn breath in over half an hour, but he's set out clearly and in layman's terms some very complex principles that I think help us all to understand how clear the thinking is that we go into government with on the morning of the 18th of October, if you give us your support on Thursday the 17th of October. With a challenge like Brexit, with a challenge like a worldwide recession, do you trust those who come to you with a manifesto that contain no economic plans to deal with Brexit or indeed the recession? Or do you trust those that have a plan set out black upon white in the manifesto, and a plan that has the credibility of being prepared by the only man who has successfully predicted the outcome of Gibraltar's economic performance every 4 years as every election has come to pass. So thank you very much to Sir Joe Bossano for taking us through that, and thank you for watching and for wanting to know a little more about our Brexit economic plan. Thank you.